And this is Dave Monk of Prairie Monk WEFT Champaign 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board.
Well, it's Thanksgiving. And I hope you all have a safe trip to your friends and relatives and interesting eating. Other countries do it more as a harvest festival. And at this time of the year, their pumpkins are ripe and the corn is there, and so you can decorate up your facilities with various harvest things, and you have harvest moons and the like. So we usually do something to say something about people who've passed, and so I'll say something about Gert Ehrlich. Gert, he was a material science person, and so he has his following from that direction. But I always remember him as a partner to Nan, his wife, who had a lot to do with early HIPS, households interested in pollution solution. I think it started off as housewives interested in pollution solution, and then became households interested in pollution solution. And this is when they would put a semi-trailer in a parking lot somewhere and break down the glass with axles of vehicles or something heavy and take the glass off to glass recycling places. And we don't do that very much anymore. Some of that sort of practical level glass collection morphed over into asking for bottle bills. And the bottle bill intent was to have each bottle have a fee on it. And that didn't eventuate. Other states did it and still do it. Gert was there in the background and very helpful. Dick Bowash passed. Dick Bowash was a farmer. His family came here as horticulturists, people who did orcharding. And they came with a gentleman called Mr. Dunlop. And Mr. Dunlop was an author of a paper which did horticultural things, and they thought that Champaign-Urbana was a good place for putting in orchards. So there was the Bowash family, the Dunlap family, and the Curtis family. The Curtis family still has orchards on the peak of the Pisota Moraine, which runs down parallel to I-57, and it more or less has Duncan Road running along the top of it. And Dick was a powerhouse in this community in terms of the family owned most of what is Savoy Plaza. And the Savoy Plaza is a big deal these days. Early on, Dick's father owned the dairy farm there, right on the corner of Curtis and 45. So it was very obvious, and the family house was there. Wanda Ben Gaucher moved the house eventually out to west of 57, and the dairy bales and stalls and the elevator which held this ensilage were taken down, and that's become the area that is near to Body and Soul. And father actually was very interested in prairie. So when I approached Dick Bowash about putting in a prairie on a cutoff to a drainage area called Lake Park, he was quite willing. And over the years, inspired Lake Park Prairie, which is intact to this day. Dick was chairperson or board member of many organizations, including the Farm Bureau, the Carl Hospital, First National Bank, and things like that. So he was 94, but he was very active right till the end. I have taken photographs of him recently and driving corn into the elevator, and he would meet with his cronies in several dimensions. One started out with the Senators Inn because Mr. Dunlap became the Republican whip at the state, and so Senators Inn was named after the fact that he was the senator from this area, but also the Republican whip. So we'll miss Dick around. He's a very friendly soul and very helpful and understanding of what we did. He was also in the military, so he was part of the invasion of Europe, and would go back there occasionally to see where he had been. Then other things that we're involved in. I want to tell you these things because one of the powerhouses of getting communities into action is that you greet each other and meet each other and you get to understand each other. So I'll just relate some of the things we do. We don't do this all the time, but because it makes a sort of a higgledy-piggledy event. But I went to the Station Theatre last night. The topic was Hamlet, and so Mike and Molly. Mike was a gravedigger. Claudius was Lincoln Macula, and the Macula family used to own the building across the way from WEFT, or rent that building, and they sold furniture. And so Lincoln is now a library scientist, but he enjoys theater, and so I just found that very interesting. I probably will have to go reread Hamlet after that. It's kind of a tragedy, but Rick Orr runs it, and Rick Orr was our neighborhood florist for many, many years and just retired recently. And florist has taken on there, and both Rick Orr's staff and florists will sometimes leave me flowers at the door. Sometimes I put them in a float bowl because they may have lost a stem or something like that. But they give me bits and pieces at the end of the weekend when they won't last over till Monday, but I can make them last, and know that. And so that's sort of friendly interaction. While I was down at the Station Theatre, I was looking at the boneyard because there's quite a debate about putting in boneyard, improving the boneyard between Race Street and Broadway. So it's been kind of cleared off. It has some untoward things happen from time to time, and there's a question about whether money should be expended there. But I think that's very suitable, and I encourage Urbana for doing that. It's counterpart to some of the things that have been happening in Champaign with the boneyard as it goes through Champaign. Looking at my notes here, because there's farmers market. I went to the farmers market, and there's Carrie with apples, and there's Kim with honey, but I walk up the road and I was amazed because I ran into Dustin Kelly, and guess what he had? He's picking autumn olives, and autumn olives are our nemesis. They're a weed tree, and so I had to have some thoughts about this. But he's actually picking the berries. They're very nutritious, and that's why the birds like them. That's why the birds like them and take them elsewhere, and all of a sudden you have an ecosystem that is basically autumn olive. And the conservation people like these trees because they did provide for the birds and the bees. When they're in flower, the bees are on them too. But, well, this is a noxious weed almost, and we spend our lives getting rid of it, and a lot of money getting rid of them. So you have to think about that, and so I'll say that because you have to think about it too. Do you really want autumn olives? If they're contained on a farm and they're pruned, then you get bigger and better autumn olives, and you can make wine out of autumn olives. You can use them in cupcakes and things like that. So I had to think twice about that. We had a discussion there. Then I went around the corner and there was Charlie. Charlie wanders up and down the street occasionally with a little dog, and she knows the pocket prairie opposites, and she's come out and picked New Jersey tea with us, and at Seymour and at Rantoul, and the little dog has been given over to Mike, and it appears with Mike every once in a while. It happened that Charlie couldn't handle the dog anymore in a situation she was in, but she works over there with Greyhound and just in the MTD building in a little way. So all these interactions are helpful. When I'm thinking back to MTD, I'm also thinking towards the Better Image around the corner, where Terry Siemens has been my photographic guru for years, sorting out on cameras and technology and things like that. Back to the farmers market area, and I wander into the art co-op, and the art co-op has the next exhibit that they will have will be a $50 picture. You're able to buy a picture for $50. There will be pictures donated by people, and the benefit will go to the Humane Society. So I thought that was pretty nice. Just wandered in there, and then I went around to the art co-op, and they've been expanding and doing interesting things, and we get to put a wall of silkscreen prints up. So I had to inspect the silkscreen potential wall, and then I met up with Susan Taylor, and we were outside enjoying the sun, and Dennis Roberts came around. Dennis Roberts is a member of the Urbana City Council, and Susan had several questions for him, and but I had to ask him also about Africa, because he and Scott Dorset, who is a radio air shifter here from time to time, and they go off to Africa, and we've had them on the program, and they went into a situation that had almost no toilets, and they've put in a toilet facility that is very positive. So we're not only talking about local things, we're talking about overseas things. Susan wanted to know where the proposed Kickapoo Trail starts. There's a big yard in Urbana. Does it start in the yards? No. Well, it actually does, because CSX has bought the line, and it's hoped that it will be an interim trail use agreement. That means that it will be rail banked, and CSX can come back in if they want. But CSX hasn't been very anxious to do that yet. CCDC has been working on that, and the state has been working on it. But it's basically the trail part will start about Dobbins Drive on the east side of Urbana. But with a little bit of wangling, you could get into the point where the Quakers church is, and there's enough area there that there could be an entrance to the rail bed. We're hoping that the yards will be retained. There is some question about whether the rail will come back from Indianapolis to Bloomington. So I hope it's there. It still services a number of agencies, including Solo Cup. And you'll bump over the railroad line there as it goes into Solo Cup. It used to go all the way to Sydney. There was an 8-mile railroad there. We're still working with UTV, so it gave me the chance to make some complimentary remarks about Urbana Public Television, and Dennis appreciated that, and I think he knows already that they do a very good job. And Jason Liggett is the leader of the push there. We have a different video person on today, and he's a volunteer. And can you tell me your name?
Yes, my name is Paul Skinner.
It's Paul Skinner today, and we will be dropping pictures in on this program, and then it will be put up on TV, YouTube. We have encountered a small glitch. If you have an older older computer, you may not be able to get it. It will go Google, Google, Google. It won't work properly. So this is a program, and David has helped me a lot with this, and Brett Pugh. We've been working in there to get up a program called Vegas, which allows us to drop pictures in, and we've got an improved PC. We basically work on Mac, but this is a PC program, and we've got it up, and it's out there, and people are reading it, and that helps us a lot, because a lot of people can't get access to this. I wanted to go back to the farmer's market, because Charlie, who had a little dog that came down the street, and she used to pick seed for us, she went out to pick seed on her own, and she couldn't quite recognize the plant, and that's not uncommon. So that's why it's very good to have some of this stuff on visuals. She and her mother were also had a booth, and they were producing fudge, and also putting interesting things in bottles that might be like this. So since I am chief salvage agent in Market Street, I might be able to acquire a bottle or two that would be interesting. When she was here a little bit more frequently, she saw that I was driving my CSX by sitting on a bunch of springs because the seat had worn out. And she went off with boyfriend, and they found a CRX and salvaged the front seat and installed it for me. So I today run around with my backside on that seat, and that's very friendly. So these are the sorts of things I want to encourage you to be involved in, to know things from the bottom up rather than accept from the top down, which doesn't always work. And we're over there in Farmers Market, so right around the corner is independent media and a lot of things that make for community sense in our point of view, preservation sense. It extends into the community. One of the things that happened this week was we had a group called the Land Conservation Foundation, headed up by Bruce Hannon, and they ended up buying 108 acres on the Sangamon, just north of Monticello, and that joins little jewels all the way up the river. So eventually we might be able to coalesce those jewels and have a corridor down the river. And as Fran Hardy said, we couldn't have gone out and gotten these jewels all at once. But little by little, you can put things together so that you have a corridor that people can enjoy. Jimmy Johns, I think, put in something like 10,000. And I don't know what the overall cost was. Yes, here it is, 455,000. The Clean Energy Foundation gave money. So when you are just loose and friendly, you eventually get to have friendships that are a little bit like David's harmonica group. You get friends together, and then it gets a little larger, and you get to be more formalized, and you have a theater, or you have a group of people, and sometimes they can coalesce. It's been tremendously difficult to get the conservation groups together. There's been about 10 attempts to get 10 or 15 conservation groups together, but they all have different agendas and different interests, and you can't always do that. So it extends to things like just high-fives going down the street and a beer down the corridor, and that sort of thing, I think, is to be encouraged. Now, I want to change directions a little bit. The weather has been good. And David, did you go out riding?
I surely did. Friday afternoon, I went out. I was making lasagna, and so I didn't have a whole lot of time because lasagna actually takes a little bit of time to make. You have to. In this case, it was vegetarian, so I had to bake the the butternut squash beforehand. So that meant that I only had about a 1 hour window to get out there and bicycle around. So I headed out. I made it as far away as Rising Road, down as far as Curtis, and then back to town. So that was just about enough for 1 hour bike ride back into town again. It's very different to be out there during most of the summer, from late June until into October for certain. You have to be very careful every time you come to an intersection because there are still crops out there and you can't see over them because a lot of the corn is still out there. But by this time of the year, you can see all over the place, and so you can just go and you slow down, of course, at all intersections, especially if there's a stop sign there. But yeah, you don't have to worry about peeking around the corner and hoping that there's no Ford F something or other barreling down the cross street toward you.
The Champaign County Planning Commission had a meeting at the MTD building, but I'm of the impression that the bicycle groups that are meeting there are basically interested in urban bicycling. That means they need junctions, they need streets that don't buckle your tire and things like that. They haven't been as interested in long range. And when we're looking at Heartland Pathways, for instance, we're looking Danville to Decatur to St. Louis to Peoria through Clinton. And that hasn't happened yet in the Midwest because the soil is so valuable for crops. And it even means that our corridors that we have saved are in jeopardy, although the farmers have been very good. They've not really invaded our stuff, but that's... So the weather is good, still good. I took in the flowers that grow outside in the street, and it's just been cold enough that they appreciated that when taken inside. Well, let's throw a little bit of music for a moment, just to make a break, and then we'll go back to last week. We were starting to imagine going onto a prairie. So I want to take you to some prairies and perhaps more rural situations.
So we've been bringing you the Duke of Uke and his novelty orchestra for the last several weeks. We have lots of other local acoustic music groups whose music fits in pretty darn well with the format of this here program. And there was a group called Mean Lids, two of whom are still in town, but Ben Smith has graduated from the U of I and he's off down south somewhere working at
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati? Well, it's south of here, isn't it?
Yes.
I thought it was more Atlanta. But anyway, wherever he's not in town anymore, so Mean Lids as such isn't still around, but we still have their music thanks to the technology of the CD. So here's a track from the last album that Mean Lids came out with. It was called Calyx, and the track we're going to listen to here is called Dinos / Smithereens here on WEFT Champaign. And again, just a little bit of music there from the Mean Lids from their album called Calyx. That's spelled K-A-L-Y-X. We have the Calyx Center out if you go a ways out of town. I can never remember. Is that Monticello?
Yes,
it's
behind Elton Park.
Yeah.
And they do square dancing and contra dancing.
I'm sure that the music from Mean Lids would fit right in at those events.
Torinos also play at the Phillips Center for contra dancing there on Friday nights.
We got a phone call from Paul, who's on the air here at 5 o'clock, and he says he's pretty sure that there is a concert tonight at the Iron Post, a CD release party for a group called U4, which I believe is spelled like E-U-P-H-O-R, featuring Matt Torino, who we just heard there, and his dad, Tom Torino. And this is their new group, and apparently they have a CD release party coming up, so it looks like there's a show featuring them this evening at 7 p.m. Let me just jump in really briefly here and also mention, a little bit earlier, Dave mentioned that you can watch this program on YouTube. That may seem like an odd concept. It's a radio show, after all. What is there to watch? It's some person talking, and then sometimes this other person talks, and you pan the camera over to him. But Dave has 30-some thousand photos, 34,000, coming up on 40,000, is it, at this point?
Yes, there's a
lot of pictures. And so when he's talking about things, we can find pictures that he has taken over the years to go well, so that it's not simply you trying to envision what he's been talking about. If you go to YouTube now, we're up to about week 6 of videotaping this program. It's not videotape, it's videoing onto a disc, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so here's the lowdown on it. If you wish you could see some of the details that you only hear us discussing, or if, for example, you're not listening right this very minute, you miss listening to the program live from 11 until 12 Sunday morning, if you go to youtube.com and you type into their search window the phrase, The Prairie Monk, you will get pretty exclusively just the hour-long videos that we've been making of the Prairie Monk show for now a month and a half. And because we have several days to go back over and massage the video, we actually drop in photos so that when you watch, you're actually seeing something other than just Dave talking and then me talking and then Dave talking again. For example, we will actually find a picture of the mean lids and we will drop it in. So you'll see that picture while you're listening to that bit of music for the couple of minutes that we broadcast it. So one more time, if you go to youtube.com and type in The Prairie Monk into their search window, you'll come up with quite a few videos having to do with Dave, but you'll especially get hour-long videos, which are the picturized version of this radio show, and it has been enhanced so that you'll get to see some pictures to go along with the various things that Dave has been talking about. He mentioned that there are people who have slower internet connections or slower computers, and the picture will stutter if you're trying to watch a video. Here's a solution. Don't try to start watching the video and just sit down right from the time you first click on the video and start watching it. You can get a sort of a ghostly bar that will start to fill up in the video window. If this doesn't make a lot of sense now, if you actually go to YouTube and try this, you'll notice that there's a faint bar that will start to fill up, and it will actually show you how much of a video has actually already been downloaded to your computer. And the problem is, if you start watching the video right from the beginning and you have a slow connection, you'll reach the end of what you've downloaded and there's nothing left, and you have to wait for the next 5 seconds and then the next 5 seconds. If you sit back, walk away, go make a cup of tea, come back a little bit later, you may in fact have enough of the video downloaded to your computer that you can sit back and actually watch, and there will be few, if any, stutters. So this is the way you can incorporate modern technology if you want to. Of course, the simplest way is to simply be at your radio Sunday mornings at 11, turn it on to 90.1 FM, and there we are. And I'll just mention, by the way, for you to make sure that we're still here, you can always make a pledge to WEFT. Anytime you don't hear us talking live on the air, you can call us 217-359-9338. And even if we are talking on the air, you can go to our website, WEFT.org, type in a couple of numbers there, make a pledge, and you'll help to make sure that the Prairie Monk Show is here week in and week out, whether or not you take advantage ever of YouTube. We should also mention that this program is also broadcast on UPTV, whatever their channel is. Do you happen to know? Channel 6?
And 99 on Comcast.
6 and 99 on Comcast. And on Friday afternoons at, I believe, 1 in the afternoon, you can see this exact same video. You don't have the convenience of being able to start it and stop it anytime you want to. It does have the convenience. You don't have to worry about stutters and sputters and the thing stopping when you don't want it to. So there you go. UPTV channels 6 and I've already forgot 99 on Friday afternoons at 1. And any old time you want to go to youtube.com, you can watch these last 6 weeks.
And the value is that you get visuals, and that adds to it. It adds maps and charts and things like that. I'm going to take you to a railroad bed. I'm going to continue the imaginary prairie. It's a railroad bed that ran between Bloomington and Kankakee. It goes up through Strawn and up to Herscher and into Kankakee. In its day, it combined another few lines that went in and picked up limestone and other products. And it is a line that has several elevators on it, so it got $4 million from the state to maintain the line. It's docked off at the Bloomington end, so it doesn't start till Myrna, and it's docked off little at the Herscher end. But on that line is a place called Kempton, and just south of Kempton there's a triangle that the railroad bed went across and left about 1/4 of an acre of prairie, and it was the sort of spot of land that you couldn't turn a team of horses in, so it got preserved, and it's known as the English Prairie because it's owned by English family, named English, and they have preserved it, and it's a state-recognized place. It would boggle your mind to go there because there are so many species. It's just it helps you to know what sort of species and what families they belong to. We ran through a few families that are easy to recognize. Just getting to know the botanical families is helpful, and it makes it more interesting. This quarter of an acre has on it probably 60 or 70 species that belong to the prairie. Prairie, if you had a square mile, you might have 100 species or even more. It depends on whether you have any terrain that's different. If you have just a flatland, you'll have the flatland species, and it'll be fairly simple. If you have an upland and a flatland, you'll have an increased number of niches into which the plants and the animals can fit. But then you get to go to Kempton, and you know that there's a little town, and so I've taken field trips there, and we've joined the Back to Kempton Day, and with people with fire engines out, and they have a competition where they slide a ball along a rope, one fire company against the other fire company. So just little things that make you realize that this is a community. There's a restaurant. There's a lady who had her building sided, so she had to take off the Italianate ornaments at the top. So I have next door a sample of the Italianate piece of wood that was taken down. There are churches. The churches may be different from the churches of a little village out of town where people who got together formed their own religious organization, and they have a factory that supports their organization. They have sewage treatment that is modern, and that interaction brings you into contact with elevator people. This is an elevator line. It's still open for use as an elevator line. May or may not be used always with the railroad, because there are constricts of how many trucks you can send out at a time. If you have 25 trucks, you probably can get the railroad to come in and pick up your portion of say a 125 car train. There's limestone in the area, so that can come out. But just getting to know that small community, to me, is an example of working in the rural community and letting people know the value of what they have. Sometimes they know very well. The English family knows very well what it's got in that little quarter of an acre, but other people do not. So not too far away from Kempton is a little area called Weston, and it's a little west of Forest, and that was a main line east and west. It's rather famous for the fact that there was a fire, and prairies do have fires. If you have lightning, you have fires, and if you have accumulated litter of a prairie, you have fires. And the trestle across a little creek was burned, and the express train did not know that, and there was a rather traumatic derailment at that location, which is on the books and fairly famous. But not too far away is Weston, and it's a cemetery. It has just overloaded with lead plant, and which is a fairly rare prairie plant. But there it is, and you have to know that underneath there's the soil with the soil bacteria, the rhizobacteria, the interaction with the plant with the soil, and it's not been disturbed so much that it isn't native. So if we come back to Wildcat Creek, we've just west of and south of Monticello. There's a rather wonderful Wildcat Creek where we have not only lead plant, but we have Horipacoon, which is rather a rare prairie plant. A really nice orangey color, yellow-orangey color, and we're not totally sure how it's pollinated. It's very hard to transplant. It doesn't transplant easily, which might mean that it has an associate with it. But unfortunately, just recently, the Department of Transportation revamped the culverts on that little creek and put the retired culvert material right on top of the prairie. And so I asked the Department of Transportation for $8,000 to remove the 2 or 3 feet of soil and allow the seeds at least to grow from underneath, and that hasn't happened. But if you go go before there was this damage, you could look into the railroad bed that goes across, and you could perhaps see a picture with 30 different species in the same picture. And it's not very easy for you to discern those plants. Some people will pull them out and put a cardboard background behind them so that you can actually see the plant. But that's not how they grow. We kind of enjoy to photograph them as they are, and as they are in different seasons. So early in the season you can go there, and there's a starry-eyed grass, a tiny little plant about 9 inches high with wonderful liliaceous-like flowers, and it's not in the liliaceous family, but it's just 3 and 3 and 3. You can see the botany of the plant, but you almost have to lie down on your stomach to see it, unless it's there by the thousand, and it often is, and you can see it as a white bloom, which will, as the flower ages, it'll go to a blue. So sometimes it's called blue-eyed grass. If you look at the moisture gradient, you'll find the little blue stem high. You'll find the yellow coneflower and 2 types of liatris. And these liatris is a plume, a purple plume, and some of it is kind of continuous because the little composite heads are all together and makes for a gay feather. Other liatris have buttons. They have a more distinct, and so that's called button liatris. There's the compass plant, the dock, and you can go to Wildcat Creek, and you can still find some of these creatures, but they do invade onto Department of Transportation territory. So we really had hoped that they would have a no-mow policy on that whole corridor, because the prairie plants creep over into the state road, and we are pleased to find out that the state is putting in an investigation to look into trails and greenways alongside roads, and we hope that will mean that we can have a no-mow on policy on that corridor. Coming around to places like Meadowbrook. Meadowbrook was is not a remnant prairie. It's a reconstruction prairie on what was agricultural land. Urbana Park District got money enough to be able to buy a farm there. There's a Clark Lindsay retirement village on the corner, but behind it is Meadowbrook Park. Early on, we didn't know so much about the biodiversity, so it's fairly easy to grow grasses. So some of the early plantings at Meadowbrook are mainly grasses. More recently, Audubon and a whole bunch of people have been involved in collecting and making that prairie more biodiverse by dropping in species and collecting species that are more typical of a prairie. It goes uphill sort of onto the Yankee Ridge Moraine, and at the top of the hill there is a viewing device with a dedication to the Freifogel family, and you can climb up onto that viewing device, and there are photographs there impregnated into plastic so that they will be somewhat permanent and not destroyed by rain, and you can look over the prairie and get a feeling for what was millions of square miles of prairie in the Prairie Peninsula. It goes right up into Canada, right down south into Alabama, east towards the eastern forest, into Ohio, and so that is called the Prairie Peninsula that goes in that direction. But it's a very large area, very rich in soil in many cases, dependent on where one of about 5 epochs of glaciation pulled soil down from Canada and filled in the rivers and the like, and created a new landscape. If you move out of Meadowbrook Park, which is fairly formal and has a concrete path which is wide enough for a tandem truck, that makes it fairly formal. You go to something like Lake Park, where the trail is about 4 foot wide, and you can have the same sort of reconstruction prairie, but you bring in interesting plants from railroad widening or road widenings. So part of Lake Park is a transplanted prairie, as well as sowing in prairie. Sometimes we can see, 5 years later, we can see where we have actually spooned in some seed or transplanted plants that have taken off. And just walking around there with observation is interesting. You might get something that is attracting things like goldfinches, and you see the wildlife starting to augment. There's a banana spider which finds its way around, and it's a very big but friendly spider, and you hate to walk through its webs, but these creatures come back. And this is a prairie that was actually encouraged by Dick Burwash, whom we spoke of earlier. What happened was there's a large meander, and there was a subdevelopment on the meander, and there was a cutoff made so that the water could go, the excess water, they made a lake out of the meander, so it's dammed, and when there's too much water goes into, things start to flood. So a bypass was made to allow the water to move down to the Umbra River, which is the drainage basin for the backside of the Posoto Moraine. If you're over on the Route 57 part of that morainic material, you would have the Posoto Moraine, and the water would go off to the Kaskaskia. So you have different watersheds here, and so the water comes down from Meadowbrook Park and from Lake Park, and the front side of the moraine is the Yankee Ridge Moraine. If you're over the Yankee Ridge Moraine, the water would go to the Salt Creek, and yet another drainage basin. The cutoff allows the water to move a little faster. So Dick used to live there and developed this 75 house subdivision, and eventually sold to the subdivision, and there was erosion on this corridor. So how I got involved in the first place was to look at a 45-degree angle cut through the regular farm soil, and realized that it was eroding fairly seriously. And one of the problems is that you can't put things like brome grass in the regular grasses that are put on roadsides, because they don't like hard soil like topsoil. They don't have time to put down roots. They're shallow-rooted plants. So we suggested that we could do something with prairie. And so if you go to Lake Park and walk around the corridor, you can see where little bluestem is now growing for perhaps 20 years later, and it's holding the bank together. It has like a mile of rootlets on it. And so as you walk around, you start to notice these things, and the Lake Park has put in groins. They're like little dams along that bypass. So that collects the water and stops it from moving quite so fast. And it also creates wetlands. So you can see wetland species where we wouldn't probably have seen them before. So it adds to the biodiversity, actually. It looks a little more artificial when first put in, but the plants tend to grow over the dam, and soil forms, and there's a niche factor there. So you can have to face some weeds that are transported by water. And some of them might be English dock, which has nice little floaters on the seed, and they float down the stream, and they can increase, not too invasive. There's reed canary grass, which is often put in to try and hold the soil together, but then it can become invasive. Then again, there are the plants that enjoy water, and there are the plants that grow up on the clay banks, like a purple coneflower, which will have a 4-foot root, and that's just nice to see those plants coming in and surviving. And it's not necessarily a native prairie, but it's a prairie that's quite close to the airport, so that if you're taking friends to the airport or from the airport, you can say, this is what our ecosystem looks like. And so we also have forest, and you have to remember that our forest was the big grove. We even have a hotel around the corner, or a restaurant now named the Big Grove. But it's indicative that early settlers came to a forested area. There wasn't much forest on the prairie, but where there was a moraine and drainage and gravel that kept the roots moist but not flooded, then you got a forest with perhaps 13 or 14 different species in it. So if you go to brownfield woods, you will find that sort of forest. And some of the trees there were native, and they may be 400 years old. How do we know that they're 400 years old? Well, foresters will very carefully take a drill and drill into it's a little invasive, so you don't do it too often, but you get to be able to count the annual rings and know how old the tree is. Some of those trees will die and then have to be replaced, and you hope they'll be replaced with native species. You will find a bur oak, and the bur oak might be near the stream. The white oak might be higher on the terrain. But it has understory herbs that are typical of that sort of forest. Things like Dutchman's breeches and squirrel corn and bloodroot and wild ginger. There early in the spring, and then later there are the jack-in-the-pulpits and things. And it can send you nuts if you get bitten by the bug of trying to figure out what's there, and then figure out what the trees are doing. If you see a bracket fund on the side of the tree, you might figure out that the tree is old enough that it's going to die, and there's a dead piece of the tree underneath. It might be on a root or something like that, and eventually the tree will die. If the tree has fallen over, there will be a sequence of fungi. These are forests that don't have very deep roots, really, because what happens is the wind comes along and the trees sort of make their own protection, so they don't need deep tap roots to get into water, and they don't need deep tap roots to keep themselves up because they have their friends and relatives. When the forest gets invaded by development, then it gets to be a little bit more vulnerable, but it's there, and it can be appreciated. Busey Woods is like that. And going back to talking about having things on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube section and you can get a Busey Woods. Dave was going to say something here.
Actually, I was just indicating we're down to the last minute here, which means I need to push this little button over here so that all of a sudden we can hear Joel Mabus. But yes, go ahead and finish what you were talking about, YouTube.
Okay. So just a visit to Busey Woods is an educational experience, and we would like more of you to do that. I'm amazed at the amount of vegetation that we've lost in the last 40 years or so. We had a person named Gleason come here and document some of it, and it's just amazing what we've lost. So we need people out there who will look after their natural areas and relish them. So this has been Dave Monk, your Prairie Monk, WEFT Champaign, 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board. Let me just take a quick moment here to mention that the views and opinions expressed are solely those of the speakers. WEFT does not take an editorial stance. And again, YouTube is out there. If you wish, you could see what some of these starry-eyed plants in the fields of them growing, thousands and thousands of them, look like. If you go to YouTube, about a week from now or so, you'll be able to watch this episode, and we will have dropped in pictures so that you will, in fact, be able to see what it is that Dave has been talking about for the final hour, this past hour.